The rain hammered the stained glass windows of St. Mary's like God's own judgment, turning my grandmother's funeral into a soggy farce where hypocrisy dripped thicker than the downpour outside. Aunt Lydia's voice sliced through the eulogies, shrill as a car alarm. "That antique oak dresser is mine. Mama promised it to me years ago." And just like that, as the casket lowered into the earth, my cousins descended on her Brooklyn brownstone like vultures, stripping it bare of every stick of furniture that had cradled our family's ghosts for decades. I stood there in the empty living room, the echo of their greed ringing in my ears, when the lawyer's envelope hit my palm like a slap. A single suitcase, locked tight, and a one-way train ticket to a nowhere town in upstate New York called Elmwood. I wasn't even sure why Grandma Etta had singled me out, Alex Harper, the black sheep of the family, the one who dropped out of law school to sling coffee in Manhattan because figuring out who you are didn't come with a salary. The family had always treated me like a polite inconvenience, especially after Dad outed my phase at Thanksgiving 3 years back, his Bible-thumping disappointment hanging over the turkey like smoke. But as I dragged that battered leather suitcase up the subway stairs that night, the city lights blurring through fresh tears, I felt the weight of it pulling me toward something unspoken, something Etta had buried deeper than her bones. The key was taped inside the envelope, a tiny brass thing that turned with a click like a confession. Inside the suitcase, no heirlooms or cash, just stacks of yellowed letters tied with faded ribbon, a silver locket engraved with E and J forever, and a bundle of photographs so old the edges curled like secrets refusing to stay flat. The first letter I pulled out was addressed to my dearest Etta, in looping script that trembled with restrained fire. It was dated 1952, from someone named Jonas. "The world may chain us with its lies, but in the hollow of your neck, I found heaven's blueprint." My breath caught. Grandma, the stern widow who'd baked apple pies and quoted psalms, had loved a man? But as I flipped through the photos, the truth twisted like a knife. 2 young women in sundresses, arms linked under a willow tree. Etta, unmistakable with her sharp chin and laughing eyes, kissing another woman's temple in a candid shot that screamed forbidden joy. That night, sprawled on my threadbare futon in a Williamsburg walk-up that smelled of takeout and regret, I read until dawn. The letters weren't from Jonas at all. Jonas was a cover, a fictional brother invented to smuggle the real words from Julia, Etta's college sweetheart at Barnard. They'd met in the stacks of Butler Library, stealing glances over forbidden novels like The Well of Loneliness, dreaming of a life beyond the shadows of McCarthy's witch hunts. But Julia's family dragged her to Chicago for a cure, and Etta married my grandfather out of duty, burying her heart in the suburbs. The suitcase was her last exhale, a map to Elmwood, where she'd hidden away with Julia for one stolen summer in '53, before the world yanked them apart. The ticket was dated for the next morning. I didn't think. I just packed a toothbrush and went. The train rattled north like it was fleeing the same demons I was, the Hudson River flashing silver under a reluctant sun. Elmwood wasn't much. A cluster of clapboard houses hugging a dried-up mill town, the kind of place where time forgot to forward its rent. I checked into the Elmwood Inn, a sagging Victorian with creaky floors, and a proprietor named Mrs. Hale who eyed my city boots like they were evidence of a crime. "Etta's boy?" she asked, sliding me a key. "She called last fall, said you'd come sniffing someday." My stomach flipped. Etta had planned this, a posthumous hand extended across the grave. That first afternoon, I wandered to the old willow grove by the creek, the one from the photos. The tree was still there, gnarled and wise, its branches dipping like fingers into the water. I sat against the trunk, tracing the locket's inscription, when a voice cracked the quiet. "You look like you're solving a murder." I startled, nearly dropping the thing. He was leaning against a fence post, all lean muscle and easy grin, with sun-bleached hair that fell into hazel eyes that seemed to see right through my armor. Cam, as he'd later insist, wore faded jeans and a flannel shirt rolled to his elbows, like he'd stepped out of a Patagonia ad but with the grit of someone who'd earned it. "I'm researching family history," I stammered, snapping the locket shut. He chuckled, low and warm, pushing off the fence to join me. "Elmwood's got plenty of that. Name's Cam Riley. I run the hardware store down on Main. Fix what breaks, sell what doesn't." We talked for hours, or maybe it was minutes. Time blurred under that willow. He knew Etta vaguely. The summer lady from the city, always with her sketchbook. And when I showed him a photo, his face softened. Julia's place is just up the hill. She passed last winter, but the house, it's like a museum. By dusk, he'd invited me for coffee at the diner. And I said yes because saying no felt like turning away from the first real spark I'd felt since my ex, Tyler, ghosted me after one too many. It's not you. It's my straight crisis texts. Cam was different, solid, without the performative charm that masked so many guys' fears. Over greasy eggs and black coffee, he shared his own ghosts. Growing up queer in a town that whispered fairy behind closed doors. Coming out at 16 to a dad who handed him a beer and said, "As long as you're happy, son." It was the kind of casual grace I'd never known in my family, where love came with footnotes. "Etta and Julia," he said, stirring sugar like it was a ritual. "They were legends here, quiet ones. Folks thought they were sisters. But we knew. The word hung, inclusive and terrifying. By the time we parted, his hand brushing mine across the Formica table, I felt the pull of something deeper than curiosity. A tether to a life Etta had glimpsed but never claimed. Back at the inn, the suitcase waited like a patient confessor. More letters spilled out that night. Julia's pleas from Chicago, Etta's coded replies hidden in recipe cards. One photo showed them dancing in a hidden speakeasy basement. Etta's head thrown back in laughter, Julia's hand possessive on her waist. I ached for them, for the love that had to hide in plain sight. And selfishly, for myself, 28 and still dodging mirrors, still letting family barbs draw blood because cutting ties felt like orphaning myself twice. The next day, Kim knocked on my door with a borrowed truck and a proposition. "Let's find Julia's house. Pay homage." We drove winding roads lined with maples turning fire red, the radio humming Johnny Cash ballads that felt too on the nose. The house was a gingerbread cottage gone to seed, porch swing creaking in the breeze. Inside, dust motes danced in sunbeams, and the air smelled of lavender and regret. Cam knew the layout. His mom had been Julia's nurse and led me to the attic, where trunks overflowed with Etta's sketches. Bold lines capturing Julia's profile, their hands intertwined in charcoal smudges. As we sifted through memories, our shoulders brushed, and the air thickened. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's echo?" I asked, voice rough. Cam turned, his gaze steady. "Every day, but echoes can guide you home." His fingers grazed mine over a faded diary, and I didn't pull away. That touch lingered, electric and tentative. As we locked up and drove back in companionable silence, the sunset painting the cab in hues of promise. But Elmwood had its thorns. Enter Max Harlan, Cam's best friend since sandbox days, who sauntered into the diner that evening like he owned the jukebox. Max was all sharp edges and sharper wit. Tall, with a jawline that could cut glass and tattoos snaking up his arms like vines claiming a ruin. He clapped Cam on the back too hard, eyed me with the casual assessment of a bouncer sizing up trouble. "Who's the city slicker?" he drawled, sliding into the booth uninvited. Cam introduced us, but Max's handshake lingered, his grip firm, eyes lingering on my lips like he was memorizing a menu. Over pie and small talk, Max unraveled Elmwood's underbelly. The old mills collapse in the 80s that gutted jobs and souls, the Bible study groups that doubled as gossip mills, the way queerness here was tolerated like a stray cat, fed scraps but never invited in. "Cam here's the golden boy," Max said, nudging him with an elbow that held too much familiarity. "Fixes everyone's sinks but his own." There was an undercurrent, a possessiveness that made my skin prickle. Cam laughed it off, but I caught the flicker in his eyes. Old wounds, perhaps. That night, alone with the suitcase, I found the betrayal tucked in a false bottom. A marriage certificate for Etta and my grandfather, dated weeks after Julia's departure. And a letter from Etta to her sister, my great-aunt Lydia's mother, begging for silence. For the child's sake, it read, "Bury this with me." The child was my dad, conceived in duty's cold bed. Etta had traded her truth for family armor, and now that armor was mine, rusted and ill-fitting. Tears came hot and unbidden. How many lies had she swallowed to keep us afloat? Cam texted at midnight, "Can't sleep. Willow Grove." I met him there, the creek murmuring like a co-conspirator. We sat shoulder to shoulder, the locket between us like a talisman. "Max warned me about you," he said softly. Says city boys come and go like seasons. I bristled, but he continued, he's wrong. I see it in you. The same quiet storm Etta had. His hand found mine then, deliberate, thumb tracing my knuckles. The world narrowed to that point of contact. The rustle of leaves overhead a symphony to our shared breath. When our lips met, it was tentative, then fervent. A dam breaking after years of drought. No fireworks, just the steady burn of recognition. Like coming home to a house you'd only dreamed. But romance in Elmwood was a tightrope. The next morning, over stolen kisses in the hardware store's back room amid coils of rope and paint cans, Cam confessed his own suitcase of secrets. A stalled art career in Brooklyn, abandoned when his dad got sick. A string of flings that fizzled because no one stayed for the small town. I shared my fragments. Tyler's betrayal, the family's funeral vulturism. And in that confessional space, we wove our stories into something sturdier. Stay the week, he urged. Let me show you Elmwood's good side. We explored it together. Hikes through fog-shrouded forests where deer froze mid-graze. Picnics by the creek with sandwiches from the deli that tasted of nostalgia. Cam sketched me under the willow, his pencil capturing the vulnerability I hid from mirrors. Laughter came easy, the kind that bubbled up unforced, and touches lingered. Fingers interlaced on drives. Heads on shoulders during movie nights at his cramped apartment above the store. It felt like Etta's summer, that stolen idol, but ours without the expiration date. Max inserted himself like a glitch. He showed up unannounced at our hikes, cracking jokes that landed like punches, his eyes on Cam with a hunger masked as banter. One evening, as we grilled burgers in Cam's backyard, fireflies winking like approving stars, Max arrived with a six-pack and stories of their wild youth. Joyrides to Syracuse, nights skinny dipping in the creek, a pact to never let the town win. Remember that time we almost got caught by Old Man Whitaker? Max laughed, slinging an arm around Cam's shoulders, pulling him close. Cam stiffened but played along. I excused myself to the kitchen, heart pounding with a jealousy I had no right to. Later, alone, I confronted the suitcase again. A final letter from Julia, postmarked 1985. Etta, if forgiveness is a door, I've left it ajar. Come north. Etta never did. Cancer took Grandpa. Then duty chained her to Brooklyn. But Julia had waited, in that gingerbread house, painting watercolors of willows that now hung faded in her attic. The humanism of it gutted me. Love as a patient sentinel, enduring silence not out of weakness, but fierce, quiet strength. The conflict crested on a Thursday, rain lashing the windows like accusations. I'd driven to Syracuse for supplies, film for Cam's old camera, a whim to capture our Elmwood, and returned to find Max's truck in the drive. Through the screen door, their voices carried, low, heated. He's using you, Cam. City boy with a sob story. Next week, he's gone, and I'm still here picking up pieces. Cam's reply was steel. That's not fair, Max. You don't get to decide this. A pause, then Max's voice, raw. I've been deciding for years, since we were kids. I love you, you idiot. Always have. The door slammed behind me as I bolted. Rain soaking through my shirt, suitcase forgotten in the truck. I ran to the willow, collapsing against its trunk. The locket clutched like a lifeline. Betrayal layered thick. Max's hidden heart, Cam's unspoken history, and mine. Fleeing again, defaulting to alone. Headlights pierced the downpour. Cam's truck skidded to a halt. He was out in seconds, coatless, pulling me up. Alex, wait. It's not what. We shouted over the storm, words tumbling like debris. He and Max had been everything once. Confidants, experiments in the dark. But it had burned out young, leaving embers Max fanned alone. I chose you, Cam said, voice breaking. From that first day under this damn tree. I wanted to believe him, but doubt was a tide pulling me under. And when I leave, you'll be the one picking pieces. The kiss that followed was desperate. Rain mingling with salt, his hands framing my face like I was porcelain. Then stay, he whispered against my lips. Or take me with you. The world held its breath, the creek swelling with our unspoken vows. Dawn broke gray and unforgiving, the kind of light that exposes cracks in foundations you'd sworn were solid. Cam and I parted at the Willow with promises. His to talk to Max, mine to call my family, to unearth whatever rot Etta's secrets might reveal. Back in Brooklyn 2 days later, the brownstone loomed like a tomb, its emptiness mocking me. Aunt Lydia had left a voicemail. Alex, darling, the estate's settled. Your shares the China. Good for starting over. Starting over. As if teacups could fill the void. I confronted Dad over coffee in his midtown office, the skyline indifferent beyond the glass. Grandma was gay, I said flatly, sliding a photo across his desk. Etta and Julia mid-laugh. His face drained of color, then flushed beet red. Nonsense. Phase like yours. She loved Grandpa, but his eyes darted, guilty. The letters I'd photocopied spilled like evidence. Etta's pleas for understanding, his mother's Lydia's reply. We'll protect the family name. Marry him or lose us all. Dad crumpled the page, voice a whisper. She chose us. Duty over. That betrayal hit like a freight train. Not just Etta's sacrifice, but my family's complicity, papering over truth with piety until it yellowed and tore. You're no better. I shot back, standing. You knew, and let me twist in the wind. He reached for my arm, but I was already gone. The elevator a steel coffin descending to the street. Rage propelled me to the station, ticket in hand for Elmwood. Not fleeing, but reclaiming. The train blurred the miles, my reflection in the window a ghost with determined eyes. Cam met me at the platform, his hug fierce. No words needed. We drove straight to Julia's house, where Max waited on the porch, arms crossed like a sentinel. The air crackled, 3 men, 3 histories colliding under one slanted roof. I owe you an apology, Max started, voice gravel. Not for loving him, but for the poison I spewed. His eyes, red-rimmed, met mine without flinching. Cam's my brother in all but blood. Seeing you light him up scared me. Change always does in this town. Cam stepped forward, bridging us. Max stayed when I wanted to run. But Alex, you make me want to build. The words hung, a fragile truce. We talked for hours in the attic, surrounded by Etta's sketches and Julia's paintings. Portraits of lovers in defiance of erasure. Max shared his own scars. A fiancé who'd bolted at his coming out. A bar fight that left him with a limp and lessons in forgiveness. By dusk, walls crumbled. We weren't rivals, but threads in Elmwood's frayed tapestry. That night, Cam and I walked the creek path, fireflies our lanterns. Etta left you this for a reason, he said, lacing fingers with mine. Not just memories, but permission. Permission to love without apology, to choose joy over chains. Under the willow, we spread a blanket, sharing stories like sacraments. His abandoned canvases, my half-written novel about a barista chasing ghosts. Laughter mingled with kisses, soft explorations that spoke of futures sketched in pencil, erasable but hopeful. The climax brewed back in Brooklyn, a week later. Aunt Lydia summoned a family meeting at the brownstone, her voice syrup-sweet over the phone. To divvy the rest properly, dear. I went, armed with the suitcase's contents, Cam's hand in mine for moral ballast. He'd insisted on coming, his presence a shield. The living room, once warm with Etta's quilts, now echoed with tension. Cousins in pressed slacks, Dad avoiding my gaze, Lydia presiding like a dowager queen. She started with pleasantries, then the Will's oversights. Alex, the china was generous, but surely Etta meant more for the family pot. I stood, suitcase thumping to the floor. She meant truth. Letters fanned out like cards in a rigged game. Photos pinned to the mantel like indictments. Gasps rippled. Lydia's face twisted. Lies. Mama was devoted. Devoted to silence. I cut in, voice steady. To protect us from your judgments. But she loved Julia, Aunt. Deeply, truly. And she left me this because I get it now. Dad's head bowed. A cousin shifted uncomfortably. Cam squeezed my hand, his thumb a Morse code of support. The room fractured. Accusations flew, tears fell. But in the melee, something shifted. My youngest cousin, Tim, whispered, "That's beautiful, Alex. Sad but real." A crack in the facade. Lydia lunged for the photos, but Dad blocked her, voice cracking. "Enough, sis. Etta's will was her heart. We honored the letter. Time to honor the spirit. Chaos reigned, but as we left, suitcase lighter, burdens heavier. I felt Etta's echo. Forgiveness not as erasure, but as light-piercing shadow. Back in Elmwood, the storm broke fully. Max threw a bonfire at the creek, inviting the town's quiet allies. Mrs. Hale with her lemon bars, the librarian who'd archived Julia's watercolors. We burned the marriage certificate, not in hate, but release. Flames danced like Etta's laughter. Cam and I slipped away to the willow, where he'd hung a swing from a low branch. We swayed there, his head on my shoulder, whispering plans. A gallery for his art in the old mill, my novel finding its voice in this soil. Months blurred into seasons, Elmwood's maple blaze giving way to skeletal winters that tested resolve like a forge. Cam and I built slowly, his hardware store now doubled as a frame shop, my laptop humming with chapters born of Suitcase secrets. Max became the unlikely glue, co-hosting queer story nights at the library, his banter a bridge over old riffs. Betrayal's sting faded, transmuted into something human. Flawed kinships that endured because we chose them. The humanistic heart of it unfolded in spring, when cherry blossoms dusted the creek like confetti from Etta's wedding that never was. I'd finished the novel Willow Echoes, a fictional weave of her letters and our lives, submitted to a small press in Ithaca that bit hard. Rejection slips still came, but acceptance bloomed elsewhere. Dad's tentative emails, evolving from apologies to questions about that artist fella. Lydia? Silent. But Tim visited, wide-eyed at Cam's canvases, whispering, "Grandma would be proud." One April dawn, Cam shook me awake in his apartment, eyes alight.
Small surprise.
We drove to Julia's house, now ours. We'd bought it with a loan and sweat, restoring it room by room. In the attic, amid drop-cloths and turpentine, he'd built a reading nook. Etta's sketchbook open on a pedestal, Julia's paintings hung like guardians. "For us," he said, "and whoever follows." His proposal wasn't a ring. Queer love in Elmwood didn't need diamonds, but a locket twin to Etta's, engraved A and C forever. I fastened it around his neck, our kiss sealing vows amid sawdust and sunlight. The dramatic peak came unbidden, a callback to that rainy rooftop in my mind's eye. A letter arrived from Syracuse, a gallery offering Cam a solo show, but in Manhattan, the city that had chewed me up. "Go," I urged, heart-twisting. "This is your echo calling." He paced the porch, Max nursing a beer nearby, uninvited but welcome. "Can't leave you," Cam said. "Or this."
Max chimed in. "Roy, idiot."
Echoes bounce back stronger. We compromised, a joint trip, my novel launch aligning with his exhibit. The train south felt like reversal. Not escape, but expansion. At the opening, amid clinking glasses and critiques, Cam's Willow series drew gasps. Me under its boughs, rendered in oils that captured vulnerability's glow. A critic cornered us. Raw revolutionary. Queer Americana at its finest. Later, on that imagined rooftop, a gallery terrace, rain-pattering umbrellas, I pulled him close. "Etta left me a ticket," I murmured. "But you gave me the journey. The ending isn't tidy, no villain slain, no utopias claimed." Dad attended the launch, awkward in khakis, hugging Cam like a long-lost son. Lydia sent a card. "Truth is a heavy heirloom. Carry it well." Max texted from Elmwood, holding the fort. "Bring back city stories." We returned north, the suitcase retired to a shelf, its contents digitized for the library archive. A public exhale for Etta and Julia. Years on, we swing under the willow, gray threading our hair, telling the tale to wide-eyed kids at story nights. How a grandmother's secrets mended a grandson's fractures, how betrayal birthed belonging. It's not happily ever after, but humanly so, love as verb, fierce and forgiving, in a town that learned to whisper welcomes instead of warnings. Elmwood endures, as do we, rooted, reaching, forever entwined.